Terrific. There we are. In a couple of moments, I'm just going to share my screen. Good afternoon. Actually, in terms of participants, we've got us. Okay, so no one's joined us yet. I'm certain they're coming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my slides kind of.
So, let's just stop the recording for now. When we see attendees joining, then we can start it, because then it will be just recording everything.
Okay, Zoom record. There we are. Well, great. Well, first off, I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. This is part of XenTegra's Tech Thursdays Technical Deep Dive series. And today we are focusing in on Nerdio. Nerdio is, I was saying this earlier, Nerdio, if you ask me, is probably one of the best kept secrets in the industry. Nerdio is one of those tools that you can easily integrate into a Microsoft AVD environment and dramatically improve your functionality and reduce your costs. And it's interesting because I think more than anything, Nerdio has given a lot of thought on how to improve the general functionality of AVD, but without the price tag. And so from our perspective at XenTegra, we are huge fans of Nerdio. We really believe it's an efficient way to get, enterprise class and more functionality from your AVD environment. And really to kind of take you through it is Greg Robertson, who is a senior sales engineer with Nerdio. And we've got Greg there. I'm assuming you folks can see him. And we're going to start off with just a little, very, very brief overview of Nerdio, just at a high level. And then Greg's going to take us through a demonstration of the product and its functionality. And I think you'll find it pretty instructive. So Greg, if you're feeling ready, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Raj. So my name is Greg Robertson, and let me give you a quick little rundown of some of the top value specific concepts of Nerdio specifically. So with Nerdio originally started back a number of years ago, and another little company that Vadim Vladimirsky had started, and as they were at the time doing desktop management as well, and when AVD came out, or at the time WVD, they started writing a number of scripts to help automate some of the process. Turns out that was highly liked in their neck of the woods, and they took that and expanded it and spun it off into a separate company called Nerdio to manage and automate Azure Virtual Desktop as it's known today within Azure. Azure is the only VDI platform that we support and manage today. And with that, there's really three main areas where Nerdio is looked at to produce additional value for our customers and those looking to run Azure Virtual Desktop. And that is, one is deploying, ease of deployment. So if you've ever tried to deploy Windows Virtual Desktop or AVD, you may have found that it may take, day, 2 days, or a week to deploy, get it, and understand it. With Nerdio, we can deploy directly into your environment today in under 2 hours and have you up and running in a VDI environment right off the bat. So deployment is super easy. Whether it's an existing environment or whether it's a new environment, we can handle either one. The second piece of Nerdio is manageability of Azure Virtual Desktop. So with Nerdio, we bring a lot of automation and simplicity to managing your AVD environment, so that typically we like to say within 3 clicks or less within general to really do anything within Nerdio. So as an example, it may be a few more clicks than 3. So if you're looking to automate the process for updating your host pool and your images, that is a couple of extra clicks just because you have to set the schedule for it, but it's super simple and pretty straightforward. And the third capability of Nerdio with Azure Virtual Desktop is really going to be around cost optimization. The ability to turn your virtual machines on and off as the resources are needed or not. And so we've got some interesting automation around auto scale is what we call it. Interesting features around auto scale and lots of capabilities from that perspective. With that, if you have any questions, shoot them out to me real quick before I get started. And I am going to get my demo environment screen showing for you guys. Let's see here if I can get that done real quick. And share screen. There we go. Hopefully by now you should be able to see my screen. This is the Nerdio Manager for Enterprise interface.
Hey, Greg, we can't quite see it.
There you go. I got to actually click share. There we
are.
Thank you. So this is Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. Typically, this is where you're going to run land as you're going to typically land in Workspaces to manage your environment. From a technical deep dive perspective, let's go ahead and deploy some resources and give you a view of what that looks like. So we'll come over here from Workspaces and add a workspace. Today is the 7th, so we'll just add that as a workspace name. You can give it a friendly name if you'd like, a description, select the resource group you'd like to be deployed into, and then the location for your AVD metadata to reside in. You can also apply tags if you'd like to the workspace, as well as everything else below the workspace. You can add tags automatically. We'll reach out to Azure and get the workspace set up. Now that we have it set up, we'll go ahead and click on the actual workspace itself. Within the workspaces, you'll notice over here on the left, we have static host pools and dynamic host pools. We'll also go through some of these other features down here as well, desktop images, monitoring, and storage as well. But within Workspaces, we have two host pool types, static and dynamic. Static is going to be those standard host pools where your virtual machines are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week within your Azure Virtual Desktop environment. With dynamic host pools, we deploy what we call our auto scale engine. These are essentially standard static host pools with our auto scale capabilities, giving you a lot more flexibility and a lot more cost savings from that perspective. Let's go ahead and deploy a dynamic host pool and give you an idea of what this looks like within Nerdio. We'll give it a host pool name. So for our first pool, we're going to just call it pool 1, a description if you'd like, and then we'll start looking at the default configuration for this host pool. This is what everything is going to be referenced back to when we look to deploy resources into this host pool. Our first choice is desktop experience, and we offer 4 different desktop experiences: multi-user desktop pooled, multi-user remote application pooled, single user desktop pooled, and single user desktop personal. The ones I typically go into in explanation that a lot of customers kind of are like, well, what's the difference between these two right here? Personal is going to be a single user to a single virtual machine, and that user is going to be permanently tied to that VM for the life of that VM. So every time they log in, they'll get the exact same virtual machine. And as well as in those configurations, typically you have those users with admin level privileges on that particular host, allowing them to install and configure and customize that environment specifically to their needs. For a single user desktop pooled environment, this is where maybe the user still needs that single virtual machine performance level, but not necessarily the ability to install and configure and customize their environment. This way, you can assign a single user to this individual VM, let them do their job, whatever they're looking for. And when they log out, we can remove that virtual machine completely out of the environment, delete it, recreate it, and then put it back into the host pool as a fresh net new virtual machine for the next individual user to use. For this demo, I'm going to utilize multi-user desktop, which is by far the most common within the industry that we've seen, because it allows you to have multiple users and have on a single VM and have the highest cost savings. Next, we get down to our Active Directory configuration. And with Active Directory, we give you the ability to have multiple profiles to allow you to configure a different profile for different host pools. It gives you some additional flexibility in defining different service accounts and more specifically different OUs within AD to deploy those VMs into. We're going to go ahead and stick with the default one. And then FS Logics is along the very same lines. We do offer the ability to have multiple profiles of FS Logics referencing different storage locations for the FS Logics profiles. And again, with this one, we're going to go ahead and move on with our default profile. Since this is a multi-user pool, we're going to provide a prefix name for the hosts that are in the pool. We will take this prefix and add a dash with 4 alphanumeric characters on the end of it to ensure that we have no host name contention issues within your environment. Next, we have our networks. Networks are pretty interesting within Nerdio because this is where you're going to define where that virtual machine lives. So maybe you, if you have multiple regions in Azure that you're deployed into, or maybe some in Europe or Asia Pac, you effectively within Nerdio define and link those networks to the product. And when you deploy a host in Nerdio, you simply select the network that you want it to belong to, which will reflect the region in which they are in. We'll go ahead and again, we'll stick with the one that we've already pre-populated, and then we'll take a look at desktop images. We will go into desktop images in more detail after the host pool configuration, but to give you a brief overview of it is when you drop down this list box, any virtual machine image that Nerdio is managing, and yes, we do manage desktop images, golden images, they will be listed up here at the very top. If you haven't got any, or you want to just select a marketplace image directly from Azure, we do have that ability as well to select any of the AVD versions of Windows 10 or Windows Server that you'd like. And then below that, we have custom images. Custom images are going to be images that we find on your storage accounts, or maybe they're unmanaged Nerdio images. So you'll find those down here. We're going to go ahead and go up and select just a Windows 11 Gen 2 standard image directly from the marketplace. And then we'll select our VM size. You can select any virtual machine in your environment that you have access to today and utilize anything that you'd like in that respect. Our next option is our OS disk. Because this is a virtual desktop environment, it is recommended to have your VMs running premium SSDs. 128 is the minimum size and the default size for all the VMs within the marketplace. Next, we'll take a look at what resource group do we want to put these virtual machines into. And then if this is a brand new host pool, as in this case it is, we give you the ability to quickly add either users or groups to this host pool for those individuals to have access to those resources. And the last option that we have is applying tags as well. So you can apply as many tags as you'd like, and then select OK. Once you select OK, we're going to utilize Microsoft Graph API, which will be configured during the implementation of the product, reach out to your environment and set up this host pool, the defaults, as well as the application group that is associated with this host pool. Once it's done, we are automatically flipped over to our auto scale configuration. And up at the top right, you'll notice that we have an on and off button. Auto scale by default is always turned off unless you turn it on manually. Excuse me. We'll go ahead and turn it on. And in this example, we'll go ahead and change our base host pool capacity from 5 to 3 and select save. Now, what Nerdio is doing at this point is it is building 3 virtual machines based off this default configuration we have right up here in the top part of the screen. Now, I also want to bring your attention to this estimated cost, monthly cost. This is real-time cost of what your minimum and maximum extremes would be. Everything turned off to everything running 24/7. Keep an eye out on this storage cost. If you'll take a look at that, we give you an option in the default configuration to change the stopped OS disk. So we have the ability to convert the disk to a lower cost storage when we shut the virtual machine down, giving you typically 50%, at least 50% cost reduction just in the OS disk storage alone. We also have the ability, and by default, we try to reuse our host names in order to help maintain the cleanliness of your AD environment. And then if you wanted a stateless virtual machine or a non-persistent virtual machine, we have an option for automatically reimaging used hosts. Basically, what this does is when the last user logs out, we remove that VM, delete it, recreate it, put it back into the environment. Any questions so far from the audience on any of the items we've discussed to this point? All right. Moving on, we will move down and take a look at 5 different configuration areas within Nerdio, starting with the host pool sizing. We're going to define an active host as being one with the AVD agent on it. And then we're going to define the base host pool capacity. This is a requirement by Azure Virtual Desktop. And so we give you that option, obviously. But because we're spinning virtual machines up and down from an auto scale perspective, we also provide the ability to define how many minimum hosts you want active at all times. In this example, we're going to leave 1 virtual machine running 24 hours a day to cover those compute requests when users log in, say, after hours or over the weekend at odd times. Then we have another option within our host pool sizing is burst beyond capacity. This is also known from Nerdio's perspective as just-in-time deployment. When based off the scaling logic down below here, when we run out of resources or virtual machines in the base host pool capacity, we can build out, in this example, up to 2 additional hosts as needed. And then when those hosts are no longer needed, rather than just shutting them down and leaving them in the environment, we physically remove them, allowing you some additional cost-saving measures and cost reduction capability within your environment by not maintaining those 24 hours a day. Moving down to the second area, scaling logic. We can scale off multiple triggers based off, yes, sir.
I guess Andy has some question. Let me just unmute him for a second. Andy, do you have a question? Maybe not. Sorry, continue.
Thank you. So moving forward with scaling logic, we can scale off multiple triggers. And and it's very more specifically off 3 specific triggers. We can scale based off the CPU utilization, the memory utilization, or even the number of average active sessions. If that is more than what you're looking for, we can also scale on individual triggers. We'll go up and uncheck the multiple schedule triggers, and then select one of those individual CPU memory average active session, plus 2 additional available sessions are user-driven. User-driven is very interesting, where when the last user logs out, we define a time frame afterwards, say 10 minutes, and then we'll automatically shut that virtual machine down on a user-driven basis. For this demo purpose, we'll go ahead and use available sessions and change the first option that we have is maintaining our maximum number of sessions per host. And in this example, I'll go ahead and say 5. Our next option is how many available sessions do you always want to maintain? And in this example, we're going to try to maintain at least 5 sessions as well. That's going to give us a total of 25 sessions, 15 sessions on for these 3 VMs, and then an additional 2 sessions, 10 sessions for the burst beyond capacity. Then we're going to look at our load balancing capability, whether it's depth first or breadth first. We'll use depth first for a better cost optimization perspective. And the way this works is when as an example, the first user logs in the morning, they're going to log in on the available sessions it's turned on. When they do that, that's going to leave us with 4 available sessions instead of 5, and we'll automatically spin up one of these existing virtual machines in the environment. We will continue to do that to try to maintain 5 sessions available up to a total of 5 VMs for a total of 25 users. Then we'll move down to our scaling restrictions. We do have the ability to scale in at any time during the day, which is typically your most cost optimized configuration, or you can define a schedule specifically to not scale in. So you can, if you give it a schedule, say 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we will not scale in during that time, but at 5 p.m., we'll start looking to shut down virtual machines and reducing the environment and cutting your cost. Next is our scaling aggressiveness. We do have 3 aggressive levels for scaling in: high, medium, and low. High will take a look at those virtual machines that only have active sessions on it or idle sessions. And it will scale back or shut down virtual machines that either do not have sessions or have only disconnected sessions. Medium will take a look at those VMs that have no available sessions and only disconnected sessions. If it has an idle session on it, it will not shut that VM down, or if it's active either, it will not shut it down. And then low will shut down only those virtual machines that physically have no connections on them whatsoever. We'll select medium in this case, and then we start looking at our third option from a pre-stage perspective. We do have the ability to pre-stage virtual machines for a number of different reasons. But if you find that you need to have virtual machines turned on Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., let me get my mouse to start working a little better. We can have, say, 4 virtual machines in this example up and running at 8 a.m. That'll be the 3 virtual machines that are in the base host capacity, and then we'll build out 1 from the burst capacity. And then once we do that, we give you the option to delay our auto scale process, typically for an hour, but maximum 2 hours, so that we don't build these out, start them up, and prematurely shut them down before your users have a chance to log in. Next, we have our standard messaging. Let me get that turned off. Next, we have our standard messaging with the ability to determine how long they have before they're forced off. You can always modify this message to curtail it to your own specific needs. And then our last option is auto heal broken host. This is a nice option because you will at some point have a host in your environment that's broken. And without this particular technology, it may take you forever to realize that you have a host that's not taking host sessions, but costing you money. We have the ability to essentially do one of the two things to fix this particular host or those particular hosts, and that's either to restart it a couple of times, and if that doesn't work, we can physically remove it, delete the virtual machine, recreate it, and then put it back into the environment, which most definitely always addresses that issue. With that, on the auto scale side, do we have any questions while we're on the auto scale?
Doesn't look like it. Doesn't
Thanks,
look
Rod.
like it, Greg. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Raj. So we'll go ahead and save and close on this. And as you can see, we are building 3 virtual machines as we speak from when I clicked save earlier. Now, let's go into some of the host pool configurations and management options. So from the drop down on the far right of manage host, we can take a look at manage, which gives us the ability to add users to have access to this host pool, as well as utilizing FS Logic's application masking and manage what applications on that host or on those hosts your users can or cannot see. Configuration for MSIX app attach, your application groups, as well as custom tags. Custom tags will allow you to add your tagging within the environment, and anything that we deploy into the host pool, we will dynamically add these custom tags during that process of joining it to the host pool. Next will be auto scale. We already went over our configuration. We do offer a visual chart history of your auto scale spinning up and spinning down, as well as the users associated with those actions during that time. And then we also have a reserved instance analytics, RI analytics. We will evaluate your environment over time and make recommendations of how many CPU cores of what series and in what region for you to go into Azure and purchase reserved instances to gain additional cost savings for those resources in Azure. And the last option I'm going to take a look at is host, resize, reimage. This is where you're going to reimage your host pool, whether it's an image or changing the VM size or changing the OS disk in bulk. So you would effectively select your image that we're managing. And then if you want to do these in groups, we can give you the option to deploy these in groups of your choosing size. Stop the process if we see the number of errors, in this case 1, and then allow you to say, look, let's do that first group and set the remaining virtual machines in a drain mode when these virtual machines get reintroduced to the host pool. So what happens there is if you're doing this during business hours, you can do these in groups. We'll do the first group, then users will be asked to log out. If they log back in, they will land on one of these virtual machines that have already been re-imaged. And then we'll grab the next group and the next group until we get all of the virtual machines updated in the host pool. Following that, we also have the ability to schedule this. So let's, as an example, now we are going to do this in a reverse order because we have not created a new image, but we're going to utilize that image name and say, let's rebuild or redeploy this virtual machine on the first Tuesday of every month at, let's say, 5 a.m. in the morning. That will automatically have a permanent schedule until you remove it of re-imaging the host pool with the latest and greatest image that we have in the environment. at 5 a.m. on the first Tuesday of every month. And then your messaging on logging out. Once we have the hostful scaling or the hostful reimaging process scheduled, I want to go over and take a look at desktop images. Within desktop images, you'll have virtual machines that are going to be your base image. And when you set power off and set as image on these VMs, we give you the ability to not only run scripts within the environment on your host. There are several dozen scripts that Nerdio comes with, or you can create your own, add them to the environment and utilize those as well. Next is our scheduling. So we want to schedule a new image creation on a monthly basis on first Tuesday of every month. And now that we know we've got a schedule set to re-image the host pool at 5 a.m., let's create this image at 1 a.m. So with this schedule, we'll create an image at 1 a.m. and then the host pool automatically deploy that image to your environment at 5 a.m. Moving down is we also have the ability to refresh the image from the marketplace. Predominantly, if you have a very non-customized image, you can always select to refresh it with the latest release from the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, and then configure the deployment of those virtual machines to install and configure via PowerShell scripts when they are deployed. So this way you can always keep up with the latest version of the Marketplace image. As an example, we also support Azure Compute Gallery, allowing you to deploy these images across the globe into the different regions so that you can pull those images locally and reduce your network bandwidth and egress fees. Next, we have the last couple of options, which is save current images backup, as well as leave desktop image running. You would want to leave the image running if you have, say, CCM managing your application updates on the front end. Once you finish this, you can click save and close, and it will automatically schedule that. Now, from a process-wise, how do we actually create the image? We have the ability to add a virtual machine from an existing virtual Azure VM or from the Azure library. Once that VM is ingested into the desktop images area, you'll either see it turned on or turned off. And this is a virtual machine, and it is always a virtual machine. It is never sysprepped. So you can always go in and modify this image by selecting the IP address or RDPing to it locally. Make your updates and your changes, and then come back and power offset as image. When we create the image, we take this virtual machine and we shut it down. We create a snapshot of this virtual machine, and then we spin that that snapshot up on a temporary VM, run any scripts against it, and then sysprep that snapshot to capture the image for deployment, leaving you with a virtual machine over here that is always modifiable. Any questions on desktop images at this point?
Hi, Greg.
Yeah.
This is Moin. I've got two questions for you. On the previous option that you showed on image update, what happens if image is unsuccessful? What is the rollback process? If something goes wrong, how do we go back to the previous image? And the second question I have is, if we don't have Nerdio, how do we do image management natively?
Okay, first one is easy. Second one is actually easy too. Once you update the image within Nerdio, that previous image becomes a quote unmanaged image. So the previous version will show up down at the bottom of that drop down list under custom images. You can also have Nerdio back the desktop image up here into a recovery services vault within Azure, allowing you to recover that as well. So you have a couple of options from a rollback perspective. So if your image didn't work, you simply re-image the host pool, go down to custom images, find the previous version, select it, and deploy that.
Okay, and how far behind we can go on versioning?
So in from a desktop image perspective in this screen is pretty much as far back as you want. From the drop-down list, it will be the current image and the previous image only.
Got it. And coming to the second question, how do we do it if we don't have Nerdio?
You struggle very, very hard. So there's a number of different ways. You can create your own VM and image within Azure. You can either clone it, do the similar process that we do, or you sysprep that image or VM and create an image out of it from that perspective. You can use Azure Image Builder as well. All of those are manual processes outside of Nerdio, leaving you with a level of overhead maintenance that Nerdio takes care of if you were to do it within Nerdio. So it is a very manual process outside of Nerdio.
Yeah, I thought so. I did few of the deployment year ago. This was the biggest struggle that I saw, where everything is manual, and once you are done building it, if you have to patch it and get it all ready, that's another nightmare in itself.
It is. And so let me give you a scenario. Let's say you have SCCM in your environment, okay? And you're running multi-session desktops. It is recommended by Microsoft to disable auto updates on your AVD images, whether it's security updates, virus definitions, individual applications. You want to turn those off, right?
Yep.
So that causes you a lot of headache of having to manually do that every so often and create it. Well, with Nerdio, to fully automate front to back, you would install the SCCM agent on this virtual machine, and then leave that virtual machine running so that SCCM can update it. And then when you power off set as image, you also want to obviously create a backup of it and leave that virtual machine running. Now, one last thing you should do is write a custom script and upload it to Nerdio to remove that SCCM agent prior to creating the image. That way, it lowers the footprint of your image, as well as it's not going to be a VM that you're going to have SCCM manage anyway, so you don't need it.
Got it.
And so that way you would have a fully automated front to back SCCM updates the image. Nerdio takes that VM, creates an image from it, and then the host pool takes that new image and deploys it for you all the way front to back.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of what I have heard so far, I'm not sure if my understanding is right. If we have a pool of 10 images, I believe the first image that we create, that is always read-write. So whoever gets the first image in a VDI scenario, that first image is read-write, and rest all the images are read-only. Is that the correct understanding?
That is not. No, that is not.
Okay.
So with Azure Virtual Desktop, you're also going to configure it so that those users don't typically have the ability to shut that VM down, modify the OS, make any major system changes. Okay, they're going to be locked out. And bear with me one second.
While we are waiting for Greg, seems like this was one of the thing in past doing deployment for Microsoft on pure native AVD. This has always, image management has always been a big nightmare, trying to update the image, trying to configure it. And this is something that I feel that I'm learning even after 2 years doing AVD. I'm learning a lot of things today, which I never knew.
My apologies on that. I had to sneeze, and I sneezed, and I thought I took myself off mute, and apparently I didn't.
No worries. Thanks, Greg. Thanks
So,
for clarifying.
Within your host pool, that image is every VM is going to be identical. It's not, they're all exactly the same. They're going to all have the same limitations, right, on updating and changing and all of that, right? However, when a user downloads data, creates a file, or customizes their experience, that's going to get saved off into their Windows profile. With FSLogix, what FSLogix actually does is offloads that profile to a virtual disk. So as that user logs in and out, they will land on different virtual machines during those login and logouts. And FSLogix will mount their profile to whatever VM they land on. So the end user doesn't generally know they're on a different virtual machine. It always looks the same because it's the same profile. That answer your, okay.
That did. Thank you so much.
We'll move down to scripted actions, and we'll take a look at, we do offer within the default configuration or deployment of Azure, several dozen scripts and run books for a lot of things that are commonly done within AVD to allow you to customize, install, configure, whatever you'd like in the environment and automate that process. Moving down, we also have several monitoring agents, Azure AVD Insights, as well as Sepago. Sepago offers 3 additional menu options: hosts, users, and applications. Neat little background information tidbit on Sepago and AVD is, first off, I am a huge fan of it. I prefer Sepago over AVD Insights because it provides a lot of performance statistics, okay, where Insights does not do that. But the interesting tidbit about it is when AVD originally came out several years ago, there was no monitoring agent available, with one exception. Sepago was the only monitoring agent available for AVD. Later on, Microsoft came along and created the AVD Insights workbook and monitoring agent. And it's great, but it doesn't do the level of performance statistic that you'll see within Sepago. And so let's go ahead and select Sepago applications and look at some of the performance statistics you get out of the Sepago agent. You can look at performance across your host pool for your applications. You can find out what applications were run, how many times they were run. In this example, this application was run 6 times, and what 6 individuals ran those. Looks like Tim Smith on the phone ran this one, as well as additional CPU utilization and disk I/O. And if you wanted to look at all of the applications a specific user ran, you can scroll down to the bottom, select the individual user, and take a look at the applications that user ran with the runtime and all the statistics around each time they ran it.
And is this something, Greg, on native AVD, we have option to see applications and their performance?
Only with Sepago, and Sepago is an additional add-on to Nerdio, which is 50 cents per monthly active user. Well worth the 50 cents to get this kind of performance statistics.
Totally agree.
All right, moving down, we have our storage. We do support Azure Files Premium, and Azure NetApp Files. If it's Azure Files Premium or Azure NetApp Files, we do have the ability to auto scale that storage as well, to change the provision quota size, scheduled quota increases, as well as the ability to increase storage automatically based off latency. So if latency goes up, we can increase storage, reducing your latency. And then when that need is no longer needed, we will spin down some of that storage to reduce your overall cost. One new item that we have within the current release of the product is additional capabilities with log analytics. So with log analytics, you can edit your retention time on how long you want to keep data, as well as you can go in and manage the counters and the sample rates in seconds for each one of the individual items that we're collecting for log analytics in the reporting piece. It gives you a single pane of glass to do this. Previously, you would have had to gone to log analytics specifically in Azure to make those changes. Within RBAC roles and login capabilities within Nerdio, we offer RBAC roles with typically 5 role types: AVD admin, desktop admin, end user, help desk, and reviewer. But you can also create your own custom definition and define what exactly that definition represents on access, and then assign that definition to a user in Nerdio. With that, I'll turn it over or open it up for additional questions or clarification on anything we've gone over. All right, with that, Raj, I'll turn it back over to you and close out the demo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. With that, I will take a couple more minutes, just quickly show you. So right now, what you were showing was Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. So customers who wants to manage their individual workload AVD environment, they can run it from Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. I just want to give a sneak peek of Nerdio Manager for MSP, especially if you have different business units and you want to go and manage different business unit, or if you have customers that you want to bring on board and run it. Pretty quickly share my screen and I can give you a quick sneak peek of very similar. We have a demo environment built, and if this is something that you or your customer wants to see, we will be able to give you access to this environment. You go to avd.XenTegraManage.com with the 2-factor authentication that I have configured. Should be able to log in, and this gives me access to, let me just validate it once, prove. So this is Nerdio Manager for MSP that gives you option to manage your customers from here. The most interesting thing in this Nerdio Manager for Enterprise that I see is a cost estimator, where you can go and build the costing, including your backup and storage, everything. And it gives you a very comprehensive cost on how much it's going to cost if you want to run this environment into your system. We can run, this gives you exact same configuration that Nerdio Manager for Enterprise has, with an option to do the cost calculator, manage your customer, the chargeback, costing, and those things. Again, we have access to to this environment. If you or your customers are interested in gaining access to this environment, we'll be more than happy to give you access. With that, Raj, you can take it over.
Thank you, Mohan. And you know what, that brings to a close our discussion. Before we wrap up, I really do want to thank Greg for taking us through this. Greg, you know, it's I still believe that Nerdio is probably one of the best kept secrets out there, and I think the more people get to know about it, the more they'll see the value and really start to see, you know, some pretty substantial savings on the AVD side. Now, of course, obviously we want to be fair to Microsoft, but it's just really kind of exciting how Nerdio, you know, has kind of built their product from the ground up in the cloud, and you know, its efficiency is really quite visible. So thank you, Greg, so much for taking us through this. We look forward to doing this again. Maureen, thank you as well. It's always great to see the MSP platform as well. Sorry, Greg, I cut you off.
Real quick, I see Andy had a question on, can I highlight along the way which features AVD doesn't do and which ones they do, but we make better. So from an overall perspective, Nerdio, compared to the Azure portal, makes it super simple to deploy. There's really no automation to speak of through the Azure portal. As you've seen, we've got full automation front to back within Nerdio. The portal doesn't provide a real way to do any image management where we add that. And then the portal does offer you scale plans, but it effectively only does really 5 things. And of those, it's primarily start and stop VMs on a specific schedule, where Nerdio does roughly 30 additional things on top of that, where we're able to turn VMs on and off, not only on a schedule, but multiple schedules, as well as CPU, RAM, average session, available session, and user-driven auto scaling, with the ability to do that as well with multiple, up to 3 of those at any given time. Auto heal as well. Nerdio does not have, Nerdio is the only one that company I'm aware of that has an auto heal capability. So there's quite a few options that are different that Nerdio brings to the table in relation to a standard AVD deployment. Also including the ability to convert the OS disk when they're not being used to reduce your additional cost.
Yeah, and not to include the cost saving that it brings with power on, power off, and those things.
Yes.
Very good, Greg. Thanks for touching on that. I think really when it comes down to it, I mean, that's a great question that came in, and you know, really when it comes down to it, there's a pretty long list, and it's pretty detailed about what AVD does better. But I think you really did summarize it well. Just for as we wrap up, I would just invite anyone who's interested that you know, if you do want to see another demo, or if you want to talk to one of our reps about, you know, trying to arrange a POC with Nerdio, we'd be very glad to have that discussion. You know, my sense is you really do need to see it. You do need to see it working in your environment to fully appreciate the benefits. So with that, I'm just going to open it up to say, look, if there's, do we have any further questions? If you do have a question, please ask, please send us a note, or just actually, sorry, enter it in the chat or into the Q&A. Because we're glad to take them. And I'm going to give it an extra, you know, I don't know, 30 seconds for people to ask any last questions that they might have. And in the event that they don't, then we will bring this Tech Thursday to a close. But let me give you a few more minutes or a few more seconds to assemble any questions that you might have. Just as we kind of sum up, we are very excited about continuing these tech talks. We find that it's probably what we love most at XenTegra, is really getting into the details and showing what technologies like Nerdio and others can do. And you know, once again, Greg and the Nerdio team, thank you. And Moyne and our marketing staff, we'd like to thank you as well for putting this on. I don't see any further questions. So perhaps what we can do is wrap this up. I want to say thank you, and we hope you'll be joining us later in the month when we have another broadcast related to Citrix and moving to the cloud with Citrix Technologies. So with that, thank you, and have a good Thursday.
Thank you, guys.